Thank you for joining us at the Evolution of Medicine Summit. A warm welcome. We wanted to make a specific thank you to our sponsors that have made this event possible. Energetics, an innovative natural remedy and supplement company, is committed to revitalizing medicine, and Cyrex Labs, a clinical immunology laboratory specializing in functional immunology and autoimmunity. Most of all, thank you for listening. If you'd like to share this with your colleagues and friends on Facebook if you enjoy the content, and if you have questions, you can ask us on Twitter with the hashtag EvoMed. Finally, if you really want to play your part in accelerating the evolution of medicine, ask your doctor if the Evolution of Medicine Summit might be right for them. Thank you and enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Evolution of Medicine Summit. This is your host, James Maskell, and our segment for today is on behavior change, but we're actually calling it The Gospel According to the Jameses. And this is not just me. I have two other Jameses in the house. I'm James Maskell, your host. I have with me triple board certified nutritionist and owner of Food Coach NYC, Dana James. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you, James.
And also a good friend of mine, Alex Jamieson. You may know from the Super Size Me movies and is an author and health coach and prolific blogger. Alex Jamieson, welcome as well.
Thank you.
We are here in Brooklyn and we are going to talk about one of the most important topics and something that's very critical to the evolution of medicine, which is behavior change. What we're looking at throughout this summit is innovative ways to be able to deal with our biggest problems, and one of our biggest problems is lifestyle disease. And if we're going to get on top of lifestyle disease, we need to make it easy for people to make significant and sustainable behavior change. And so I've got two of the experts. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
So if I could come to you first, Dana, I've been very impressed with cognitive and behavioral therapy, CBT, as a strategy that practitioners are implementing to look at the stress response. For those listeners who have never heard of it, what is CBT and how do you use it in your practice?
So CBT is a modality that's used to change the mindset to bring about a change in behavior. And it's a very powerful way of releasing stress responses. What's interesting is that most of us do the opposite. We change the behavior thinking that it's going to change the mindset. So a classic example would be, I'm going to go on a 21-day sugar detox. That's it, I'm done. I'm going to invoke all of my Facebook buddies to keep me on track with staying off sugar for 21 days. I'm going to get into my paleo group. I do it. I get through 7 days. I feel fantastic. My energy's up. I've got clarity. It's feeling really, really good. But then a challenge happens. It's 6 p.m. in the evening. I'm ready to go home. It's my husband's birthday. I've organized an amazing dinner for him. And my boss comes to me and says, I need this report tomorrow morning. It's going to take you 3 hours to do it. You have to stay tonight. I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
Neither option feels good to me because at that time, it's either disappoint my husband and stay at work and get the report done, or it's say to my boss, no, I can't do this. I've got something on and I'll do it tomorrow morning. But then I fear that I might lose my job.
Okay.
So neither of those two feels really good to me. I get angry. And what happens is I take it out on food. So all of a sudden I go into the office kitchen and I find the M&Ms. And I just start eating M&Ms. I don't care that I've been off sugar for the last 7 days. It doesn't matter. At that point in time,
Yeah.
I'm irritated
Yeah.
with what's going on. So that's not what CBT is, but that's what most of us do. So CBT is getting into those underlying beliefs that cause us to act out that way. So if we look at that example, I was using that food to numb myself from the day. But it's not as simple as that. There's an underlying belief there that says, I must give, I must do, I must overperform. Because if I do that, then you can't reject me. Then I'll be accepted. And to go a little bit deeper, it then says, I'm okay being depleted, so you continue to accept me. It's better that I get fired than get rejected. So you get into those really, really deep layers there.
That's really important because I've seen for myself or speaking to other people about it that people say things like, well, whenever my sister does this, then I feel like this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that gap in between where we have the ability to examine that story, and it sounds like that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly what CBT does. I mean, it's a deep process of going in to look at those underlying beliefs. So it's very synergistic with functional medicine, which is let's find the core root of what's going on from a biochemical side to induce a change. And CBT is the same thing. Let's find out what the underlying psychological issue is that's presenting itself emotionally this way.
So it seems like, I mean, your role as food coach, but it seems like outside of just telling people what to eat, it seems like this is the real work. What made you want to sort of have this as part of your practice?
Oh, it's absolutely vital that people change their behaviors. So you can easily give somebody a food plan and say, eat a plant-based diet and add some protein in and let's add some supplements in. That's all great and that's the foundation. But what happens if they don't stick to it? You know, many of us will come up with excuses as to why we can't do that. We don't have enough time, or there was a stress trigger that caused us to go down a different response. So it's changing the behavior and looking at ways that you can embody that and make that and own that. So in my opinion, when you're looking at wellness, you're looking at food as the foundation, you're looking at customization through supplements and additional support physically, which is really the functional medicine side of things. And then you're looking at the mind piece.
Yeah.
So, because the mind will ultimately drive the behaviors.
Do you have any of your own examples that you can share?
Yes, I do. I have a number of them. But really, for me, the story that I talk about is I had my own 10 p.m. baking addiction / eating cookies at 10 p.m. in the evening about 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
And it felt compulsive. Like, I was drawn to the kitchen at 10 p.m. even though I didn't want to be there. Like, cognitively, I'm like, you don't need the cookies. You don't even want the cookies.
Yeah.
But I would manage to make them.
Yeah.
And like any person that has a little bit of an addiction, you're savvy and you don't keep your drugs in the house. So I wasn't keeping cakes and cookies there. I wasn't keeping flour or butter in the house.
Yeah.
But I would keep coconut oil, cacao powder, almonds, some coconut sugar, all there to, you know, make smoothies and enhance other things. But I could make little raw vegan treats for that. Like, it was a challenge for me to do that. And incredibly frustrating because I didn't know what the driver was behind it.
Yeah.
And it took a good 9 months to actually find out the underlying belief behind that.
And is there a way to get to these things outside of just a relationship with a practitioner who's trained in it? I mean, is there a way for people to get there by themselves?
Listen to lectures like this to have people ask the questions. So it's very challenging for you to ask the question yourself because you're a little bit blind to it.
Okay.
They don't necessarily need to go to a practitioner, but if they have a savvy friend who could ask them that may assist with that. So for me, when I discovered what my underlying core belief was, it wasn't from working with a practitioner. It was listening to a lecture like this. Now, the woman that spoke later became my business coach. And what she had said was, part of self-love is self-trust. And for me, I didn't trust myself in the kitchen. Like, I really didn't. And if somebody had said to me, you're lacking a little bit of self-love, I'd be like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, I have boundaries, I take time out for myself, I have a manicure and pedicure, I've got great self-care practices. But that wasn't all. I really didn't trust myself. And the integrity that I had to myself was pretty limited. I'd say that I wasn't going to bake cookies, yet I'd find myself in the kitchen doing that. And the kitchen was really a place of fear for me. And when you have that epiphany, it changes things like that. So for me, when she said that, I was like, oh, wow. I do just need a little bit of self-love. What I'm doing is nurturing myself with food. Now, for somebody else looking at me, that's fairly easy to see that. But when it's you, it can be really challenging to look at it and see that. So then I was able to go, oh, if that's what I'm doing, I can nurture myself with a cup of tea. And I did. It was a simple switch like that, and it's done. And that's the transformation that happens.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, and I hope that what you just shared will be as powerful to everyone listening as as that same relationship and talk was for you. Alex, I know that you also have personal experience, and I think it's almost like everyone has to go through their own feeling in order to, or through their own process in order to be able to help other people. Can you identify with what Dana's saying here?
Absolutely. I agree 150% with everything she's expressed. And I think a lot of us nutrition folks that are out here helping other people have been through our own journey, our own discovery process of like getting to feel good finally in our body and how we deal with food. And how a part of what helped me understand it was really learning how a habit works, how the brain is there's such a thing as neuroplasticity. The brain can change. And what it likes to do with habits is actually physically create physical pathways. That's what a habit is. It's like pushing a wheelbarrow down the same track over and over and over again so that it becomes a groove. Okay. And it just becomes easy to slip into that habit over and over again.
Yeah.
And your brain doesn't actually like to break a habit.
Yeah.
So I like to talk about transforming habits instead, because there's a 3-part system to each habit. You're triggered, you take an action, and you get a reward. That's that wonderful dopamine response that we all love from the chocolate cake at night, right?
Yeah.
We get that reward at the end.
Yeah.
But what happens, or what I like to do with my clients, is look at those triggers and talk about transforming the action in the middle that still gets you the reward. Because that's what we want. It's either going through that process of stepping into your best self and really feeling what that feels like, to try it on like a coat. Like, this is how I want to feel in my body. That's very powerful stuff.
Yeah.
But what's that middle action that you're taking? Right now it's eating the chocolate cake. But I think there's 3 root causes to these cravings, these triggers.
Okay.
It's either emotional or nutritional or physical. And those 3 root causes need to be looked at in terms of how are your habits evolving over the course of a day. Because you might be triggered 50 times over the course of a day.
Yeah.
And it can be, overwhelmed at work. It's the phone call from your boss. It's the kids haranguing you from the back of the car. It's all these different things. So the actions you can take either need to be an emotional, like a stress relaxation technique that you can use. It may be nutritional. Your brain is the largest consumer of glucose in the body. And when it runs out of glucose, it is going to say, eat the chocolate cake right now, please.
Yeah.
And it is almost an overwhelming response.
Yeah.
So you do need to get into the nutritional habits of eating those foods that are going to give you like a slow IV drip of glucose throughout the day rather than the hit.
Yeah.
So that you're not starving yourself all day to try to, lower your calories. You really do need to feed your brain. People say they have low blood sugar. I find it's low brain sugar most of the time. And then the third part is physical. Are you actually tired? Most of us do not get the rest that we need.
Yeah.
Do you need to move? We are physical animals. We need to move around. And your body craves that. You just may not understand that that's what it's craving. And then awesomely, sex and intimacy is something that we need as human beings. And a lot of us aren't getting enough.
Yeah.
It may be hugs. It may be actual time in the bedroom with your partner. So looking at those 3 root causes of the cravings and then figuring out, what do I need more of in my day to get that reward and transform the action?
So what are some rewards in that situation with the cake? For example, what are some rewards that you could give yourself that would give that end benefit that aren't as self-destructive?
Absolutely. Well, I like to reverse engineer things.
Okay.
So what is it that you want right now? But what preceded this? What got you to this point?
Okay.
So often with the sweet cravings, I almost across the board have people include sweet vegetables at dinner. so that we all crave sweet. We all want sweet. It's human to want sweetness.
Yeah.
We love that flavor, that taste. It lights up our brains. But you can have sweet potatoes or roasted beets or something else that's sweet. So that can help stave off the craving later. And let's be honest, most of us do not need to be up past 10:30 at night. Most of us are totally sleep deprived.
Yeah.
And what our body really wants is rest. But if we're going to stay up and watch, another 5 episodes of Orange is the New Black, then our brain is going to say, okay, if you're making me stay up, I need some glucose.
Yeah.
So let's look at how you're spending your day. And then again, the physicality part of it. Like, it's 10:30. Most of us should be with someone or having had really good connection across the day. If we're not having that, then honestly, I got to say, how much are you masturbating? Where's your vibrator? We need to be taking care of ourselves physically at night too. So those are some of my favorite rewards.
That's interesting. Well, that's great. So, coming back to the CBT structure, it seems like the big thing that you can control is not the stimulus, but the story you tell yourself about that stimulus.
Right.
What do you think about the story changing generally? Because I think that's sort of where the potential is.
Absolutely powerful. I mean, that's how you do it. And just going back to what Alex was saying about being aware of the physicality of things. So if you're tired, that's when you're typically going to crave something sweet. And the response back to that is, I'm tired. I need sleep. I don't need sugar.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
And I like Alex's point about the nutritional side of things. So the first thing that you want to do when you're struggling with a habit that you can't break is clean up the diet.
Yeah.
Like, you take out the gluten, since gluten completely changes the brain chemistry.
Yeah.
We all know that if you are eating gluten-based foods, you tend to have more of those cravings.
Yeah.
You have more of those blood sugar highs.
Yeah.
So it really needs to be a clean diet. That's the first step that you start with.
Yeah.
And then there's looking at food sensitivities. Is there a chromium deficiency? Do you have candida that's going to be driving you towards the sugar so it survives?
Yeah.
Those pieces need to be cleared up. And then you layer on more of their cognitive behavioral therapy because you get a clear reading of what that person's dealing with.
Yeah.
So there are times where there isn't an emotional response to it. It's just a physical response.
Yeah.
Or often it can be exacerbated because of the food that's being put into the body.
I mean, it sounds like that's one of the benefits of working with a professional that can help to determine whether this is majoritively, is this a nutrition issue? Is this a physical issue? Or is this an emotional issue? Because I'm sure for most people, it's just a combination of those three. They're sort of in that fine tuning.
Absolutely.
And I think what's exciting about this series that you've put together is you're bringing together some of the best minds around this new way of looking at medicine and healing. This whole world that's evolving of functional medicine. But what is missing, unfortunately, in most medical practices is that habit transformation, that action guidance. Like, here's what I want you to do, but here's how you're going to do it.
Yeah.
That constant guidance. People need regular coaching.
Yeah.
I need regular coaching. I've had my own coaches for years.
Yeah.
And that's how we get better. We have to have somebody else helping us look at things. Because if I had to listen and guide my life based on what was happening in my own brain, I mean, it's crazy time in there sometimes, right? We all need an outside perspective.
Yeah.
So I hope what most doctors are moving towards is bringing in someone who's actually layering on this behavioral change. Because they can say, here's a list of foods you're supposed to eat, and here's the medicines you need, or the nutrients that you need to eat more of. But how are they actually going to make that into a lifestyle?
Absolutely. And if you are listening to this and you know that your doctor has none of these skills, or doctors are not trained in habit transformation at all, this is a new
nutrition.
Or nutrition. Ask your doctor if listening to Dr. Frank Lippman's talk this weekend on how he works with his health coaches might be right for them, because this is a huge issue, and doctors like Dr. Lippman are using the best of functional medicine and health coaching to be able to create transformational practices. And frankly, I think for the middle of the bell curve of America, this is really what's necessary for most people to start in this transformational process. And so, we're very encouraging for all of the types of medicine that have accountability structures, have organizations of people. My mother-in-law lost 110 pounds a year and a half ago, and all that was different was she had to call someone to tell them about what she'd eaten, and every day, and tell them what she'd eaten. There was no payment. This was just, friendly communication. But I think that sort of accountability is huge, and we can talk more about that. So, Alex, I know one of your big things, you've got a book coming out next year, and it's really focusing on cravings. How does that fit into what we're talking about here? Because it seems like that's really very parallel.
It is. I think, cravings are so powerful. It's a physical, it's an emotional response. We want things. We want things all the time. It's not just food. It's not just the chocolate cake. We are wanting beings. And I'll speak for the female of the species, but I know that it's true for men as well. We think most of the things we want are bad because we've been taught from a very early age that we want too much, that nice girls don't ask for things, that, well, the things that I want aren't good for me. Sugar is bad for me, so my body must be wrong if it's wanting that thing. So from a very early age, we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust our own bodies. And that just sets us up for a constant war throughout our lives. You ask most women, and they've been on dozens of diets throughout their life, and they've all, quote unquote, failed at them. Oh, I couldn't do it. I failed at this one again. But really what it is most diets do not address this underlying issue of the emotions, of the habit transformation. They just say, don't do this, eat that instead. But they don't tell you how to set your life up for it.
Yeah.
And I had my own experience a couple of years ago. I was the vegan expert for over a decade, wrote 3 cookbooks on it, and we made Super Size Me, and I was the vegan girlfriend in the movie. And after about 12 years, all of a sudden I started craving meat. And this was bad. This was not a great thing for me.
Not McDonald's though.
It wasn't McDonald's. No. I have not craved.
That's not really meat.
No. There you go. It's not really meat. No, I would find myself out at a restaurant with friends. I'd be ordering, the salad with the tofu on it, and they'd be getting salmon or steak, and I'd just start salivating over what they're eating. And I fought myself on it. I did not trust this craving for over a year, at least almost 2 years. And I tried everything within the vegan framework to address it. And at the same time, my menstrual cycle was getting shorter and shorter. Every 2 weeks, every 16 days. I did everything you're supposed to do. I looked at my blood work. I took all the sea vegetables, all the superfoods. I did everything you're supposed to do, and nothing was working. And I was still craving meat. So I said, you know what? I teach other people how to listen to their body and use their gut as their GPS.
Yeah.
Use their body as their guide. And I'm not doing it. So I finally started eating, I'd go to the co-op and I'd buy some eggs and put it under my kale.
Spotted in New York Magazine.
Yeah.
Vegan chef Alex Jamieson eating meat, buying meat from the counter.
It was terrible. I was in this emotional turmoil, which just made me crave it more, actually. When you refuse to give yourself something you want and you're, so secretive about it, all the shame, body shame that we go through. So I just finally had it. And physically, it felt really great. My body said, yes, more of that, please. Emotionally, I was a wreck.
Yeah.
And I started to experiment more and more. I started, telling a few friends who were very supportive. And I finally just said, you know what? This is who I am. This is what I need right now. It may not be forever, but right now I need some animal products in my diet.
Yeah.
And these cravings were actually telling me the truth. But it's an experimental process for everyone. I know that if I have chocolate cake at 10 o'clock at night, I'm going to feel terrible the next day. Mm-hmm. How do I know that? Because I've done it many times. Right? So you have to experiment with each craving and see, well, okay, I'll have this thing. How does it really make me feel? And how does that compare to how I want to feel? So you do have to be willing to open up and experiment a little bit with all of these different things. And again, it can be nutritional, emotional, it can be physical. And it may require you to look at your relationship. It may require you to look at your job and how your day is set up.
Yeah.
So the book really dives into all this information about cravings and habit and willpower. Willpower is a huge one, by the way. I don't know if we want to go into that or not.
We definitely will be going into willpower, I would say, in this time. But I think this is such a huge piece that you bring up because both of you have had your own journey. And what we're looking to really encourage people as a result of this summit is, look, if you're unhealthy, you need to go and see one of our practitioners and start this process. But I can't tell you how many people's lives have been transformed, and yours are two examples of like when you've actually started listening to it, following and doing the work. Now you're helping other people. I know that both of you enjoy your work now. This is not a day-to-day 9-to-5 drudge that you're doing. What sort of difference does that, when you've had clients, Dana, maybe that have had a world transformation through, changing, like what Alex is saying, like your work or otherwise, how does that impinge on all of these emotional issues when you actually find to do something that you really like doing?
Oh, I think it's incredibly rewarding and liberating. You get excited by it, knowing that you've helped somebody with their transformation. I recently just started working with a client about 4 weeks ago, and she sent me an email and said, I've lost 19 pounds in 4 weeks by coming off gluten and sugar, and I can't believe how peaceful I am. And that's what we want to remember. Like, people are truly looking for peace. They want peace in their brain.
Yeah.
And I work with a lot of women, and so I sort of talk to that. Is that most of the time our brains are so cluttered with horrible self-sabotaging thoughts. We're thinking about food and how it adversely affects our body, whether we should eat it or whether we shouldn't, and then we go and eat it, and then when we feel depressed that we've eaten it, and so forth. It's just this, it never stops.
Yeah.
And so when you break that addiction and that habit, that actually goes away.
Yeah.
And you have more space in your brain to be creative and do things that you really want to be. And you can be this sort of peaceful, luscious woman that you see yourself being.
Yeah.
And we were talking before about pleasure. And so I ask women what makes them happy. You'd be shocked as to how many women look blankly. And they don't know. They don't know what makes them happy.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, let's just go through some things that are really simple. Because when somebody's eating to make themselves feel good in the moment, they need a replacement habit, which is something that's actually going to make them feel good.
Yeah.
So by simply saying, I'm not going to have that, leaves open this void where they're in no man's land. You need a replacement habit and something that makes them feel good. So it could be as simple as making a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Like, put a little bit of sugar in that cup of tea. When I was breaking my sugar addiction, that's what I did. I had this chocolate mint tea, and I would put a teaspoon of coconut sugar in it, and it was just enough to break through that physical addiction. And tea is very nourishing. So then I'd sit down and relax into that, and then I'd spend half an hour reading a spiritual book. So I was then working on myself at a deeper level, as well as breaking that addiction. Or it could be going and taking a bath with like lavender oil or something like that, using just a luscious body cream, like being really opulent with these things, curling up on the sofa with a book and a cashmere throw. Like, do things that engage your senses, because that's what makes you feel good. Like, sometimes clients will say, well, I'll go and do some sit-ups. That isn't going to work. Like, you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So, chocolate cake versus sit-ups.
Yeah.
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's do something that actually makes us feel good.
Yeah.
And Alex was talking about orgasms before. And I think orgasms are, it's a great analogy, because if you think about an orgasm induced by a fantasy, that's not real. But it brings on a physical response.
Yeah.
You have changed your mind and your body. And that's exactly the same process that we're talking about here. You changed your mind, you believe, you feel into it, you are that person, and you will be that person. And Alex was also talking about just neuroplasticity. And we create these pathways. Now, to break a habit, you need to create another pathway.
Yeah.
The body is really efficient and really lazy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't want to do that.
Yeah.
So it's going to do everything it possibly can to keep you stuck.
Yeah.
You are going to hear the voices that tell you not to make a change.
Yeah.
I can start tomorrow. It's okay. It's only a little piece. You'll be fine. Trust yourself. You can do it. You can have a bite of bread. It's not going to cause any ramifications. And you know that if you start with that tiny piece of bread, the entire basket is going to be gone.
Yeah.
And you just hear those voices keeping you stuck. And then, but however, once you create a brand new habit and you practice that, you've created a new pathway.
Yeah.
And you will move towards that. You will be guided down that particular pathway as opposed to the previous one.
You know, it seems like this is the crux of the issue, is how to create this new pathway and how to stick to that, that new pathway in that sort of initial time where things are difficult. Those voices in your head, are those the same voices that we're shifting during CBT? Because it's really the stories that you tell about yourself, right?
It is, absolutely. And it may be a recording that you've had playing over and over again in your head since childhood. It may not even be your own voice. It may be somebody else's voice, a parent perhaps, a mother or a father who told you something about yourself when you were a kid. It may not even be your thought. It may be someone else that you work with in the office.
Yeah.
We are all connected through this internet of the mind, and you do have to be aware of what's my environment like. I worked with so many clients who are trying really hard to transform their habits and how they eat, but they are the only person in an office filled with 20 people who have candies all over their offices. They have treats everywhere, terrible vending machines, and they don't get the support, and they're in an atmosphere of ill health and bad eating. And in that way, one of the things that I help people do is kind of detox their office, whether it's a cubicle or just a desk. And those tiny moments where you are triggered to go get a candy or to go, get your adult milkshake, also known as a frappuccino, every day at 3 o'clock. You have to have things in your immediate environment so that you are triggered by a habit, or you're triggered by something, again, a stress, the clock changes to 3, whatever it is. Have those essential oils at your desk. Grapefruit is an amazing essential oil. It really helps with sugar cravings, especially in the afternoon. Have some fresh herbs, like a little pot of rosemary will do well in most offices. Rub some of those leaves between your hand, smell it. It really enlivens your senses. Get up and go do what I call bathroom aerobics. Go to the bathroom, do some push-ups, do some jumping jacks, lock the door for a second, do the wall sit, do something different at that trigger point to help you feel good again.
Yeah.
I love that idea of the rosemary. I think that's fantastic because it is a plant that's going to survive in an office environment, and it has just that beautiful smell to it.
And just the color green is so soothing to have something living in your immediate environment. Or those bamboo sticks that you can get in a pot of water with rocks. Yeah. Just having something green is very soothing for most people at work.
Yeah, that's such a big thing. I see that. You mentioned that work environment. America has a real culture of sugar enabling. Like it's okay to bring someone maybe who even has like a terminal disease cupcakes in a hospital, even though that's basically poison. At that point, let's get into the willpower, because it's very difficult to be strong-willed in an environment that has so many potential triggers. Right. What when you look at willpower, what's your sort of thoughts on it, and how we can engage that best to be able to do it? Because I've definitely had my own issues with that. I think everyone has when they're doing that, right?
We all have, and we think we don't have enough willpower. We're just not strong enough, and that's when we get into an even darker downward spiral of hating ourselves into feeling good about ourselves, which doesn't work, by the way. You can't hate crunch your way into 6-pack abs, So willpower is a finite resource. We only have a certain amount of it during the day. And every single decision you make saps a little bit of willpower away from your reserves.
Okay. So
the first thing you need to do is make sure you're getting enough sleep every night. Because if you wake up sleep deprived, you're already on a half tank, 3/4 tank of gas.
All right.
So that's the first part. And then
so your willpower gas is going up when you're sleeping at night.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's an easy thing to think about.
Actually, go for, I'm not going to say 8 hours because that'll freak most people out. Go for 7 hours of sleep a night. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Because most people are only getting about 6.5. And then you want to automate as much as possible with good habits in the morning. I find that good habits in the morning are the easiest ones to implement because that's when you have the most willpower. Use your willpower resources to transform one habit at a time. And then once that habit is set and done, then you can like move on to the next thing, and you're not sapping your willpower to do 8 things at a time.
Yeah.
So if you can get yourself doing, what I call a clean green protein smoothie every morning, not just greens and fruit, but actually protein and maybe some supplements in that smoothie, like that's a great breakfast, and it's super easy to do. You can even measure it out or make it the day before, super easy. And then you've got yourself fueled, and you're on to the next thing. And then look at how you commute. Look at how you manage your kids in the morning. I mean, I have a kid myself, so I know that having another person there to help is really important. How are you guys splitting up the childcare in the morning if there's 2 parents in the house? Or is there some way that you can manage things the night before, so in the morning you're not trying to do 50 things for your kid with your kid?
Yeah.
Is there some way that you can take the pressure off yourself and have other people manage themselves better?
Yeah.
How much can you delegate in your
Yeah.
life? Is it possible to spend, depending on where you are in the world, $20 to $100 a week having someone else come into your house and clean for you?
Yeah.
Because if you don't have to do all that cleaning work, you'll actually have more willpower to use towards transforming your food habits. So it's all these little aspects of willpower.
It seems like if you get your morning right and you're getting to bed at the right time, the potential to have the wrong time to do the wrong things is much lower, right?
It's huge. It's huge. If you can conserve your willpower in the morning and by getting enough sleep, you will have enough willpower in the evening to actually help you manage those sugar cravings.
Dana James?
So I come from a slightly different perspective, and I have my clients not look at it as willpower.
Okay.
Because willpower implies it's something you don't want to do.
Yeah.
So you're going to crack.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at it and say, this is something that I want to do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm embracing this and I'm taking on these fantastic new habits because it's part of who I am. You don't need willpower.
Yeah.
I actually call it well power. I love
that.
I call it taking it from willpower to well power. So
Great. That's perfect.
So we do agree.
That's great.
Yeah.
And just on that, from willpower to willpower, like words have a vibration to them.
Yeah.
Like just that subtle difference makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it makes it a lot more fun.
Yes, and I say to my clients, don't look at things like it's deprivation. It's not. It's you being discerning.
Okay.
Because when you're discerning, you're in control. Whereas deprivation is like, I'm depriving myself and therefore I'm going to crack and I have to go towards my cravings. No, I'm being discerning. I am choosing to be strong and it's my decision to do this.
Yeah.
And going back to Alex's example of being in that toxic work environment is inspire people. Like as a woman, we tend to have this fear that if we go against what everybody else is doing, we're high maintenance.
Yeah.
And that's a huge area of shame for us because we don't want to be high maintenance.
Yeah.
And so then we just go with the flow and then we end up being disgusted with ourselves because we'd actually committed to ourselves that we weren't going to do something like go to the vending machine at 3 p.m.
Yeah.
And so then that guilt then takes over and then before you know it, you've had a pizza for dinner.
That's such a big issue there, and I think you've been talking more directly to women. Later on in this summit, we have the evolution of men's health, and I think for men it's a slightly different mindset. But I'm glad we're talking about women because also in the evolution of nutrition day, Dr. Alejandra Carrasco is really talking about the family as an engine for sustainable change. And that's one of the things that I feel is huge, is that I've seen from my experience of working with doctors who are working with clients, the mum gets on board, makes some changes, thinks differently, makes changes in the house, the sort of positive effects on the husband, the kids, like if you have one child that can't eat gluten, change within the whole family really propels that forward. And then you are that change. You're an example to other families and other people want to know, oh, how did you get off the ADHD medication? Oh, that's interesting. Let me try it. It seems like this is the real, the force of this wellness revolution, of this shift of the evolution of medicine, is people taking responsibility and engaging that in other people through the example that they set. And it seems like women have a really key role to play in that because one, probably more adaptable to taking care of themselves, which is the sort of the matriarchal response to this patriarchal problem that we've found, which I think is really powerful. But like you said, being an example in an office situation or in a family or otherwise, that has to be the move, because otherwise it's the self-sabotage on behalf of groupthink that isn't serving us.
And I don't want to exclude men from this conversation, and I think Dana does as well. We work mostly with women, but what I see is that most single parent households are headed by women, so they're the ones making all of the medical and nutritional decisions in the house. And even in families where it is a man and a woman, or a woman and a woman, or whatever, the women tend to be the people who are spending the healthcare dollars and spending the food dollars in the home.
Yeah.
We need to support them first. I find that we need to support women first to feel good and like get their energy and their willpower up just another 25% so that they have the foundation to make the change in their family.
Yeah.
That's a really great point. And just when you work with women and men, there is a different approach. So women are actually much more complicated than men.
Yeah.
So men, you can give them a plan and you give them the guidelines, and guess what? They go ahead and they do it.
They just do it.
So there are no excuses.
Okay.
So, and then they see the results, and that's what keeps them motivated, and they keep going. Whereas with women, there's so many excuses. That's the stories that you were referring to before. It's because my kid is sick, or my best friend's boyfriend just broke up with her, and therefore I need to have a cupcake with her or a champagne with her, or my boss is an asshole, or I've got 100 million emails to attend to, and women feel completely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so there's this self-neglect that happens, and then you just get into that negative spiral. So it's putting that self-care back in. Yeah. And when a woman is peaceful, how do you think the household is? Yeah. It's peaceful too.
Yeah. That's the amplification, which I think is a really exciting part of this evolution of medicine, is that it seems like Mark Hyman's talked about with the obesity crisis, it seems like this is transmissible. You know, you make change and it affects other people. Just going, you said men and women operate differently. Do you think that there's a case that even women, amongst women, different women will have success with different strategies because their brain is wired slightly differently, or they have different experiences of certain things?
Yes,
absolutely. And one thing I find is really interesting is women that I've worked with, and this was my case as well, is who played sports when they were kids. And this may be a little bit of a tangent, but I find that women who played any kind of sport, could have been team, could have been individual, they have had an experience of themselves feeling very strong and capable.
Okay.
And they've been through training. And they've had a coach them through and over pain. Like, they've known, oh, yeah, I know that when I try really hard, it sometimes hurts. And then I feel okay and I feel better and I keep going and ratcheting things up. Huh. And I noticed that women who have been in sports as a kid have that memory of body confidence to go back to. Mm-hmm. Whereas women that I've worked with who never played sports, they don't have that understanding of themselves as really strong, empowered physical beings. And it could be a little bit more challenging to get them back to that place because they've never known it before.
Interesting. Yeah. And could that just be, is it just sports, or do you feel like it could be like dance or other things? Or
absolutely. Any of those apply for sure. And there have been plenty of studies showing that young women who have played sports are much less likely to either get into or stay in an abusive relationship.
Okay.
That there is this confidence that comes with playing a sport, that you know your body well enough to know what's good for it and what isn't.
Okay.
Interesting.
Let's get into the practicalities now of a starting point. You mentioned those three areas: the physical, the emotional, and the nutritional. I'm sure there's people who are listening to this who are probably really identifying with a lot of the stuff that you're saying here. And one of the cool things about this summit is that this is almost like having a first appointment with both of you.
It's a freebie.
Yeah.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that you'd be saying when you were speaking to people and helping them to understand their problems in the context of what you're describing. So let's just say you're working with someone now and they have all of these issues that you described. Maybe I could ask each of you in turn to talk about where you start as starting points with people, like the mindset, and also just starting points for starting to address this pattern. So let's start with you, Dana. Where do you start with people to start to make progress towards, now that they've identified maybe how they want to feel?
Right.
How do they get there?
I always start with nutrition. Okay. So the first thing that I'm doing is cleaning up their diet, as well as adding in any type of supplements that are going to support them with that. That's step one, and that's what we do in the first consultation. And then in my follow-ups, we are working more on the mind side of things. So the first thing to do is for that person to identify what habit it is that they want to break.
Okay.
And that person must really want to break that habit. So it's to write that down, that they no longer want to be controlled by that particular habit, to get it down on paper and to connect with that.
Is it really important that they write it rather than you write it?
They've got to write it themselves, because it's not to do with me. They need to connect with that. There are so many different techniques that you can use, and it really depends on the individual. So when I'm working one-to-one, I'm connecting in with that person to identify and work with them on what their biggest challenge is.
Okay.
And it's understanding what type of techniques are going to work for them.
Yeah.
So it might be that person has that nighttime eating, and that's what they really, really want to break.
Yeah.
And the first thing is that they write that down on a piece of paper that they want to break it, and then they can do like a ritual of release, and they can burn that paper, or they can rip it up and toss it, and then they get into the writing down of the benefits and the emotional benefits that they're going to get by not being addicted to that.
Yeah.
And then we can do things like the accountability and the consequence to help them with that. And what a consequence is, if that person eats the cake at 10 p.m., there's an immediate consequence that happens the next day.
Yeah.
And so this is something that I applied for me to help break my own nighttime eating, and it was that I had to go to work with no makeup on and no high heels. So for me, that was incredibly unprofessional. And
for me, it would be the other way around. I would have to wear high heels.
and so that's what it was. So I had to think about it at that point in time. Did I want to do that? And so there was an immediate recognition, immediate consequence the following day that had to be applied. And so that stopped me from doing it. And so that helped break the cycle that I was in. And the first 3 days were incredibly challenging. Then day 4 comes along, and it's like, wow, I actually made it through.
Yeah.
4 of those days. Then you get to a week. And then it's 14 days, and then it's 21 days. And they say it takes 21 days to break a habit. I actually think it's a little bit more than that. But you start becoming the person that you want to become.
Yeah.
Now, a consequence isn't going to work for everybody. So a successful woman, a consequence is really good because they're very much used to saying yes to everything.
Okay.
Whatever they want, they can have. I'm going to go and have this glass of champagne. I want that dress. I can go and have that. So they're used to getting a lot of external reward.
Yeah.
And saying no to themselves, they very rarely do it.
Okay.
So a consequence is quite good for that. But if you've got somebody who is very much into punishing themselves, then putting a consequence in place isn't going to be right for them.
Yeah.
Maybe they need a little bit of a reward that's something different. But you have to work with that client. You have to understand what motivates that client.
So you start with them, and just to give you some resources, are there resources that you curate for people who are going through this process? I know you guys both are working on books, and maybe your book will be what you'll curate for them, but are there resources that you curate to people in between these sessions? Say, hey, go and learn about this before our next session, just so people will be able to, look at some of those things now?
I have them read spiritual books. I have most women start with Brené Brown's TED Talk, and then if they like that, then I get them to read Daring Greatly. It's the first one I start with. It talks about shame, and for women, shame drives a lot of their subconscious behaviors.
Yeah. Those are great ones. Those are great starting points. Alex, what's your starting point with people, and what resources can you recommend to sort of start on this process as well?
It's very similar to what Dana was saying, looking at where's your nutrition now? What do you actually eat? Let's get a clear sense of that. But I ask them, why are you here? What are you feeling that you don't like? And how do you want to feel? Really getting them to feel and imagine, visualize, how do I want to feel at the end of this program? Kind of the future forward self.
Yeah.
And I call it your big motivating desire, your big mode. What is it that you really want to get out of this work? Let's get super clear on it, because if you don't know what you want, it's really hard to make a transformation happen. So we go through all of that, and we talk about all the things that are going on in their life, but what is it that you're actually craving? We talk a lot about cravings, because you can give them a plan, but when they have these consistent habits and cravings that come up, we need to start reverse engineering ways to psych those things out.
Absolutely.
And, one of the things I've done is I've created this cravings quiz that helps people look at their cravings and understand them better.
Yeah.
And that's a great resource that people can look at now. It's just cravingsquiz.com.
And so the cravings gives them an insight into a lot of other things, I'd imagine.
It does. It's actually a rebranding of the Ayurvedic doshas. I've created these 3 cravings types that are totally modernized based on the doshas. And you get your cravings type, which is featherweight or firebrand or earth mama, when you do the quiz at cravingsquiz.com.
Oh, cool. That sounds fascinating.
That's a good one. So one question I want to ask before I get into this, because we're getting into part of this evolution of medicine is an evolution towards technology. And now we're just on the edge of starting to see that people have a Fitbit or other things they're doing. And in a couple of years, everyone will have the iWatch and will be measuring everything. What are your sort of hopes and fears for this next generation of technology where there's going to be a lot more accountability potential, but, it's like the technology is unlikely to get to the core of what we've been talking about today. Alex, maybe your thoughts first on this?
I'm super excited. I've had a Fitbit for years now, and what I've always wanted it to do is measure my brain glucose. Okay. How is it going to tell me? How is it going to tell me 20 minutes before I hit that wall that, hey, beep, 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 your brain sugar is low. You might want to have some almonds and some cherries right now, or something to, help you get on track before you fall off the cliff. Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah, upstream information. Well, I'll put a note into Apple and see if they can can work it out. Dana, what do you think about this?
Oh, I think it's great. I think if it forms part of a community and people can support each other, that's going to be really powerful.
Yeah.
And the more information that we have, the more we can induce a change. So there was some technology that came out several years ago, and it had to do with your sleep. I think it was called the Zen Sleeper. It's no longer available.
Okay.
But I loved using it, and I used it for maybe about 2 weeks. But I would have a look at how deep my sleep was when I added in magnesium. What happens if I add in 5-HTP? Yeah. What happens if I add the 2 in together? And so it was just this great experiment to see how things were working on my body.
Yeah.
So anything like that gives you more information is going to be insightful for you.
Well, I think what's really exciting, and the way I see it, is that once we have access, because the only information that we really have access to now is sort of like how we feel and then our symptoms, right? This is the information that we're looking at. Whereas once we have a lot more information, I think it's going to be, people will pay attention, just like you're saying, to the information that's available, and they'll be able to sort of hack their blood glucose over a day because they'll be able to track it. At the moment, no one's tracking it. Like, the blood glucose is just a function of how you feel. Once you can see and you've got the upstream information, you'll be like, how do I keep this level? Oh, wow, I just ate the cake and it went out of control. I think there's going to be so many empowering messages that come from it. And that's why I'm really excited about the future of this type of medicine, the evolution of medicine, because I feel like a lot of things are working in our favor to really, build something sustainable. And I think that's a big part of it. So I really appreciate what you guys have shared today. And I think for anyone who's listening, there's some great starting points to be able to identify cravings, look at willpower or well-power and so forth. The last question that I've been asking people all the way through the summit, and I will be asking all the way through the summit, is just, and maybe I could just go to each of you individually, Dana first. When I say the words, the evolution of medicine, what does that really make you feel or think about?
That's exciting. And I think what we're going to see is a split between emergency care and more chronic care. So that we stop expecting our physicians to deal with these chronic conditions by using a pill. And this is emergency medicine, and this is how we approach it. And then there's chronic conditions where it's much more integrative, where you realize it's beyond just a drug. It's food, meditation, movement, supplements, acupuncture, so forth. I think we're going to see just a lot more integrative practices being created, because that's how you work with chronic conditions. Plus, we have technology. So one key area in terms of chronic conditions is community. So we can use technology to help create communities and assist in changing our health and improving our health.
Yeah, exactly. Alex, the evolution of medicine, when I say those words, how does it sit for you?
I envision healthy doctors taking care of the whole person. And when I say healthy my grandfather was a doctor, a family doctor, and unfortunately he was one of the least healthy people in my family. He smoked, he was overweight, he had an alcohol issue, and currently one of my best friends is in his final year of rotations as a med student. And they have them working insane hours, doing incredibly unhealthy things to the human body. And I look at how is the system taking care of our doctors? How are we giving them the resources to be really well, whole people? I think that issue needs to be addressed so that they can begin really taking care of people and knowing I need to actually spend some time with my clients. I need to spend a half an hour with a patient to understand how their life is so that I can recommend all of the things they really need, not just give them a prescription for painkillers.
Yeah.
So well doctors serving the whole person.
You could really imagine that a doctor getting themselves well, the knock-on effects of that could be bigger than almost anything else because they have all of these lives in there. And if you've seen doctors that have gone through their own transformation, typically now they're attracting patients that want to go through that transformation. They hear about the transformation. So, I mean, that's a very interesting idea if we could increase the health of all of these doctors. I also see a lot of what you're talking today being really relevant because in the hospital environment, the nutrition is off. The stress is hardcore. The toxicity is pretty serious. Certainly.
That's why I had my kid at home. The last place I want to bring a healthy child into the world is a hospital, but that's just me.
Well, it's just me too. I had one. I didn't have anything.
Hey, your wife.
I did no work. Good support, actually. But, yeah, I think that's really powerful. And look, I think that it's interesting with this summit because obviously today we're speaking mainly to patients and saying, look, this is something that you can do and you can take responsibility for. And we're encouraging patients to get doctors to come onto the summit this weekend and learn how to do their practice differently. But I could see that it could work the other way where patients, if you see your doctor as not being the change that they need to be, there's an opportunity to listen to this kind of content and to be able to deal with those things. And I know that being a doctor has a lot of added stresses and so forth, but I think that, this is going to be the quickest way that we're going to see a massive transformation in medicine is if those people that are responsible for doing it can make that change first. And I think that what you're saying today, what you added about health coaches, I really feel like this is going to be an important part. They should be working with doctors, and I think that's part of the evolution of medicine as well. So it's been a great hour. I really appreciate you guys spending the time with us. We've been coming live from Brooklyn. This has been The Gospel According to the Jameses. James Maskell, Dana James, Alex Jamieson. I really appreciate your work. I know that both of you have interesting projects coming up. Dana, where can people keep up with you and your work?
You can find me on my website, which is www.foodcoachnyc, or they can find me on Facebook, which is foodcoachny.
Cool. And Alex?
So, yeah, keep an eye out for my book, Women, Food, and Desire, in January. And take the Cravings quiz. Go to cravingsquiz.com. It'll give you a great introduction to everything I've been talking about.
Great. Well, some perfect resources to get started. This has been The Evolution of Medicine. We've been talking about cravings and behavior change, the most important topic in the lifestyle medicine and the evolution of medicine. I really appreciate both of you being here today. This is James Maskell, The Evolution of Medicine Summit, and we'll see you next time.